broad and international audience. Thank you also for your introduction. So I'm at present one of the two managing directors of Ecofys. I'll give you a little background on where the energy report came from first. Ecofys is a knowledge company fully specialized in sustainable energy and climate change policies. We've been around since 1984. We're now over 200 people strong with offices in Europe, the US and China. About 2 years ago, we thought it was about time to see whether our mission statement that you can see at the bottom of this slide, a sustainable energy supply for everyone, whether that could be taken literally. So for everyone, meaning for everyone in the whole world and for 100%. And that's where the energy report started. So we started an internal piece of research to see whether we could make all this knowledge that we have on the various renewable energy technologies, on energy conservation in industry, in transport and in buildings, and on ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, could be fit together to come up with a coherent picture for a world sustainable energy supply. So a global energy system fully relying on sustainable energy by 2050, because that's what we put in the question to ourselves. Can this be done? After a year, we had some interesting results that gave us reason to believe that this was indeed possible. And then we came together with WWF, who were working on the same issues. And we came to an agreement whereby WWF took ownership of this work and commissioned the second phase of the project, in which we deepened some areas like the sustainability of biomass section and the economic section, and in which we made it ready for publication. In that second year of the project, we worked closely together with WWF towards the launch, which was indeed on the 3rd of February of this year. And since then, both of us have been working intensively with this report in worldwide discussions and in acquiring new work on our side, of course, because for us as a knowledge company, that's the way to bring this a step forward. And we look forward to many follow-ups in the future. I'll first spend a few slides, 3 to be precise, on the background for the question, can this be done? Because I think many of you are familiar with that. And I'll spend the bulk of the time on explaining the work that we've done and telling you what this would look like. First of all, what's the issue? That's first of all a hugely growing demand for energy, or actually for the services behind that demand. If you look at this bar graph, then you see the gray bars that give you a middle-of-the-road projection for the growth of the world population from 2000 at the left to 2050 at the right. The yellow bars show you the economic growth projections. Again, a middle-of-the-road projection, taking, and now we're looking at the right axis, taking GDP, world GDP, from 40 trillion euros in 2000 and growing it to over 160 trillion in 2050. And that's what happens if you project that economic growth, especially in developing countries, will go on for quite a while. It represents a global growth of about 3 to 4% per year, which has been the average over the past decades. So over this period from now to 2050, you see a population growth of 33% and a growth of the world economy projected of 200%. And that for us was the starting point of our analysis, because we said it's not about lowering economic growth projections, it's about seeing whether these growth projections can be compatible with a fully sustainable energy system. So we assumed that the demand for energy services, that's the real products from industry, buildings and transportation, would be roughly in line with GDP growth. The issue on the supply side. Fossil fuel supplies are of course very tight. I can show you many slides on that, but I've taken here a projection from the IEA, the International Energy Agency, that has been asked by the OECD countries to monitor issues on supply and demand of oil. And you see here how they project the world oil production to grow over this period from now to 2035 in this case. The oil from the currently producing fields is the dark blue wedge. And you see that those fields are generally starting to be depleted, and the production from those fields is overall coming down. Of course, there are also, and that's the gray wedge, fields that have already been discovered but still have to be developed. That provides for some more oil. But even to keep crude oil production at a constant level, and that's this line at the top of the blue wedges, we need to find a lot more oil fields and take them into development even before 2035. And then IEA adds some liquids that can be produced from natural gas. That's already quite a big business. And they add the unconventional oil, which can be grown, of course, but not at will, not at a random speed. That has a limitation as well. And if you compare this kind of growth rate of like 85, 86 million barrels per day right now to maybe 95 in 2035, and you compare that with the demand for energy services, it's clear that there is a problem in the supply of this oil and of fossil fuels in general. And thirdly, of course, we have to look at CO2 emissions, which drive climate change. These must be reduced. And I've here shown you a graph that is from the emissions gap report, commissioned by UNEP. We wrote part of that at Ecofys. And what you see here is scenarios that give the world a chance to keep global warming on average below 2 degrees. For this analysis, they took all existing energy scenarios and emission scenarios and ran them through a climate model, or an emissions model rather. And what you see here is a selection of scenarios that give the world a likely chance, that's bigger than 66%, or a medium chance, that's between 50 and 66%, of keeping this global warming below 2 degrees. And then you can derive some general characteristics from that. All scenarios that gave this fair chance show that the emissions peak at around 2020 or before. And all scenarios show that emissions go down, have to go down a lot by 2050. And that's roughly what you see here is 60 or 70% lower than they are now. By the way, they also looked for scenarios that gave the world a chance of staying below 1.5 degrees, which is deemed a safer level, and there were hardly any. So that's where this scenario fits in as well. But what it does show you is that this kind of emission reduction, this very drastic emission reduction, is necessary to prevent very bad effects of climate change. So that's where the question stems from. Our question is a fully sustainable global energy system possible by 2050. And I guess you won't be surprised by the answer. The answer is yes. And in the work that we have done for the energy report, which is actually the second part of that report, and it's called the Ecofys Energy Scenario, we show how this can be done. This gives you a broad overview of that answer. Here you see in the graph a picture of the world energy demand. It's taken as final energy demand, so the amount of energy that's delivered at the end user. which now is a little above 300 exajoules per year. If you would follow business as usual with its increase in demand, but also with its business as usual increase in efficiency, that would result in a dashed line. So we would see a growing, strongly growing energy demand resulting from this demand for energy services. Not as fast as the demand for energy services, because there is some energy efficiency also in business as usual, but way too fast to solve the equation with renewable energy alone. So the first thing to do from this baseline is to apply rigorous energy savings, rigorous energy efficiency measures, sometimes involving electrification. And that's the first step, that's this gray arrow. That leads to demand that stabilizes, even goes down to, let's say, the level of 2000 again, at a little under 300 exajoules per year. And then you can endeavor to cover that demand fully by renewable sources. In this case, it's the renewable electricity in the purple, renewable heat and fuel in the pinkish, and actually the result of our analysis shows that when you base yourself fully on solutions that are available now, on technology that is already available in 2011, that there is still a small fraction of demand which cannot be covered by renewables. But actually WWF has taken that as a reason to believe that in 2050 this can be solved, because of course we have 39 years left to develop technology as well to tackle this remaining 5% or so. So that's the difference between the 100% on the front cover and the 95% that now stems from our analysis based on presently available technologies. If you split that energy demand over the various big categories, then you find this picture. So it's red for industry, yellow for buildings, and blue for transport, and then a small fraction of other demand, with again the baseline that now disappears through the top of this graph. It is our finding that the absolute energy use can be reduced from where it now stands at above 300 to well below 300 without reducing the demand for energy services. In that, it is one of the most ambitious visions today. Here you see a tree of all kinds of energy scenarios, far-reaching energy scenarios, by their demand curves from 2000 to 2050. And you see the energy report down below as the one with the lowest demand of all scenarios. Actually, it's two groups of scenarios. These lower ones are based on final energy. The higher ones are based on primary energy, which shows you a bit different position on the scale, but you can see the evolution there. These scenarios in generally show a growth. Many others do, and there's one here which is the Greenpeace Revolution revised edition of 2010, which also basically stabilizes the demand towards 2050. Just to give you some background. But more interesting is how can this be achieved? First of all, I would like to discuss with you the demand stemming from industry. The reduction in demand for raw materials and increased efficiency are key there. So how can one reduce the demand for raw materials as a growing demand for products? That's basically by material efficiency, by making the same products, cars, airplanes, transport materials, etc., with less material. Then when you have the physical demand for the material, then of course you try to produce that with the most efficient technologies, and there's an enormous gain possible there. because even if you compare factories at present, the best factory with the worst factory, you can see that improving all factories in the world to the standards of the best, as it were benchmarking, that you can already make an enormous gain. And then, of course, there's sometimes the possibility to take alternative production pathways, alternative production methods that are already demonstrated, but that come with a lower energy demand. And what's very important is recycling of materials, because recycled aluminum, for example, only costs you a fraction of the energy demand of the demand that you would need for primary aluminum. Then this is the picture that results for the various energy carriers in the industry, and I will give some more background in the next slide. The black is the fuels, and there's a part that's not replaceable with present technology. The red is the fuels that we can replace with renewables. That's the yellow actually. The red is the high temperature heat to be replaced with renewables, and the purple is electricity. In the next slide, number 12 here, you can see how this graph results from the two effects that I described. In the top left, you see the physical demand for materials like paper, the orange one, aluminum, the very narrow yellow band, the cement, and steel in billions of tons. So that's what we calculated, starting from economic growth with the accompanying increase in demand for products, then applying materials efficiency, recycling. Then you come to this growing, but gradually growing at a lower speed demand for physical quantities of materials. And then, of course, the energy efficiency comes into play. If you apply the measures that are already known right now, and you take into account lifetime of factories, etc., and the implementation speeds that one can achieve, then this is the picture for the intensity in gigajoules per ton, indexed to 2000 at 100%. So the energy intensity of a ton of steel, cement, aluminum, and paper in 2000, if you take that as 100, then we have shown that you can reduce that to about 40 to 50%. It differs a bit from material to material by 2050. If you take these two elements together, so the physical demand with the energy intensity, you get the resulting final energy demand for the industry. Then to buildings. Of course, there we have to strongly reduce the heat demand, but there's also a need to electrify certain energy functions. And why is that? That's a general tendency that we find when analyzing this question. It's actually easier to supply electricity with renewables than to supply high temperature heat and fuels. Because for electricity there are so many options. We have wind, solar, bio, geothermal, wave energy, etc., etc. And if you look at the presently mature options to supply high temperature heat and fuels from renewables, it often boils down to, well, of course, some geothermal, some solar, but a lot of that boils down to bioenergy, and that has its limitations, as we will discuss further in the presentation. Electrification of a function also often comes with a strong improvement of efficiency, so then it works both ways. For heating and cooling, the measures that we have taken into account is for new buildings a near zero energy use. And that's actually very close to current EU policy. The policy in Europe is that after 2020, all new buildings will have to have near zero energy use. That's by, for example, by making a passive building with a very good insulation in need of very little installation. So in general, a lot of design attached to that. Then all of the existing buildings will have to be retrofitted at an ambitious rate, because you will have to do all of them within those 40 years. And the demand in those existing buildings has to go down by a very large percentage. So it's so-called deep renovations. And then, of course, cooling. The cooling demand in the buildings worldwide is rising, is increasing quite rapidly. We will have to find solutions for that involve renewable and local solutions. And of course, a lot of the cooling demand can also be avoided by designing the buildings in a better way. Then after those measures come the local solutions. So we deploy solar water heating as more or less a standard measure to provide on average half of all the domestic hot water needs. And the remaining heat demand of the buildings is in general taken care of by electric heat pumps, which take care of part of this electrification, replacing fuel use with renewable electricity. And that's what you see in the overall resulting picture down below. You see the demand going down from a peak in 2020 towards a lower level, let's say the 2000 level in 2050, even in spite of the much larger population and much wealthier population of the world. But within that picture, you see a strongly growing electricity demand. This is partly due to the number of appliances and their penetration worldwide, also into developing countries. But it's also due to our electrification efforts, due to the fact that we've taken the remaining heat demand into the electricity sphere. The next slide will show you the details again. In the top left-hand corner, the physical quantities, in this case the floor area in billions of square meters, and split into new stock and current stock. And here new stock is the yellowish part of the bars, is taken as everything built after 2000. So you see that due to the heavy expansion of total floor area in the world, especially in developing countries, that the fraction of buildings built after 2000 is really very substantial. And in Europe, this picture looks much different. Many of our buildings in 2050 will have been built before 2000, but this is the overall picture for the world that is expected. Then, of course, again, in the lower left-hand corner, a measure for the indexed demand. So in this case, megajoules of energy required per square meter of floor area of the building. And there you see that the graphs for heat, which are the reddish colors, go down very drastically. They go down from 100% indexed value around now to, let's say, 10% in 2050. This is, of course, due to the strong renovation and the new buildings that have a near zero energy demand, but it's also partially due to the fact that the remaining heating demand is taken into electricity. And that's also the reason why the residential electricity per square meter is still going up, whereas in commercial buildings the two effects cancel out, and the amount of electricity needed per square meter of floor space is roughly stable over the 40 years of the study. If you multiply the square meters by the megajoules per square meters, you get the graph I just showed you as an end result for the building sector. Then, sorry, I have a number there. Transport, the third major category of demand. It's of course, there's an enormously growing demand for transport, for passengers and for cargo. And again, we've decided not to look into a major reduction of this travel volume. In this scenario, we take that more or less as a given, but we've looked at all other measures that can be applied to make sure that for this strongly growing travel volume, less energy is needed. And that first of all involves modal shifts toward efficient transport modes. So for example, in urban areas, it's a very smart thing, not only from the avoiding congestion point of view, but also from the energy point of view, to try to bring part of the traffic to rail traffic. And it's also possible to electrify that, of course, but just taking transportation from individual cars to public transport helps you a lot in the way of energy efficiency. Then here again we have applied ambitious assumptions on efficiency improvements in existing technologies. So cars can be improved, trains can be improved, even planes can be drastically improved by at least 50% in their use of kerosene per passenger kilometer, for example. And finally, there's a decisive shift to electric forms of transport. And then in the end, you will of course need fuels, especially in this transport sector, and those will be renewable fuels in our scenario. The resulting picture is shown below. So here again we see the envelope of the total demand, total final energy demand of the transport sector, still rising sharply towards 2020, then bending downwards and ending at a level that's lower than where we were in 2000, even with the strongly increased travel volumes. The fuel use in blue is especially still strong in aviation and shipping, but has been greatly reduced in road and rail traffic. In response, the electricity use has strongly increased over the period, and that's even a bit modest here, because the amount of electricity, a certain amount of energy delivered in the form of electricity to a vehicle can do much more work than the same amount delivered in the form of a fuel, because the efficiency, for example, of a car engine is only 20%, and the efficiency of an electric engine on a train or so can be 90% or higher. So out of the total travel volume, the travel performance, a larger share is electric than this graph would lead you to think. This slide again shows you how this is calculated. In the upper left hand we have the physical demand for transportation. It's for the passenger travel, those are the light blue bars. They are expressed in, let's see, trillions of passenger kilometers. For the freight transport, it's the grayish bars, also strongly growing with the growing volume of the economy, the growing international trade, the growing trade within countries, and that's expressed in ton kilometers, a very common unit for cargo transportation. That again is combined with an efficiency metric. In this case, in the lower left-hand corner, it is the megajoules that one needs per passenger kilometer, or the megajoules per ton kilometer in the case of cargo. And there you see that this time it's not indexed, but that this quantity is around 1.6, 1.5, 1.6 right now, and that we think that it could be diminished to 0.4, 0.5, so by a factor of 3 or 4 by 2050. And that means that even in spite of the doubling volume of transportation, we can still arrive at the demand graph that I've shown you in the previous slide, with its diminishing energy demand for transport. Of course, if you look through these various segments of demand, then you see that bioenergy is a very important element of the energy supply. Because as I told you, for electricity there are many sources available, but for fuels, especially in this transportation, and for some of the heat and fuels in industry, you need bio. This graph shows you the same demand envelope, but here the dark gray is the fossil and nuclear part of that. That will of course go down to like 5% in 2050. The light gray is the part that we can solve with all other forms of renewable electricity. And the colorful bands in the middle represent the role of bioenergy. We must take into account that there is a substantial role for bioenergy right now, and that's in the form of so-called traditional biomass. But that will need to be phased out, but because in general it's not sustainable. And then, of course, the uses of biomass for transportation fuels, the blue one, and for industry heat and fuels are growing. Just one more word on these traditional biofuels. Of course, they need to be replaced by more modern and renewable energy technology, for which many options are available. It's not that we think that we should get rid of that demand. These blue transport fuels are mainly for long-distance road transport, aviation, and shipping. The red part of the biodemand is for industry, so especially applications that require very high temperature or a very specific energy carrier. For example, it needs to be a gas or it needs to be a solid. So we try to solve as much of the picture without bioenergy because you run into limitations there with respect to competition with food production and other sustainable issues that we have studied in detail. So we already knew that we had to limit the amount of bioenergy needed, and this is what we do need it for in a 100% scenario. This is the same picture again, but then split into its heat and fuels part in the gray now, and the electricity in the purple. And this is how in the scenario, we can solve the electricity part. And as I said, that's not the hardest part of the equation. There have been many studies also on this 100% renewable electricity for parts of the world. Actually, renewable electricity is so abundant that in the latter part of the time frame, various options will severely compete with each other. Of course, the supply-driven sources, that is the sources that by definition follow the resource, like the sun or the wind or the waves, will be limited by grid capacity, and you need some demand following sources of electricity, like hydro, geothermal, concentrated solar power with storage, and bioelectricity, a little bit of bioelectricity, to provide the balance there. The modeling of the grid limitation we have done at a very high level of abstraction. We've said, well, let's not go into details into the gigawatts of connection needed between various countries or regions, but let's derive from the body of knowledge that we have access to what the share is that a certain grid, a mature grid, can take up from supply-driven sources. So these sources like PV, wave, and wind that by definition follow the sun, the waves, and the wind. At present, that level is at least 25%. In a mature grid, you can feed in 25% of PV, wave, and wind energy without running into major problems that can be accommodated by regulating, by controlling the other energy sources in the grid. However, that's not enough, because to solve the equation with 100% renewable electricity, we need higher shares, and that number needs to be pushed up. And actually, we've shown that at present it's already possible for a country like Ireland to accept 40% of wind energy alone in its present grid if you take the right measures of control. In general, to get to this higher fraction, and we need 60% to be able to cope with 60% supply-driven sources in 2050. What you need for that is well-connected grids, regional interconnections. Capacity should be increased. The range of transmission lines should be increased. We need a lot of R&D for better grid stability, because those control issues really are a serious matter when you go towards these high percentages. And then to really push up the limit, we will need a combination of grid improvements, of demand side management, so the capacity to control demand as well as supply, and of some storage options beyond 2030. When you combine all these elements that I've described together, we can show that 95% renewable energy worldwide by 2050 is possible. And this is the resulting picture. So you see here again the demand envelope that I've described, how it is construed from our energy efficiency assumptions on buildings, industry and transport. You see the diminishing role of fossil fuels there, and the small sliver of nuclear. So the various shades of gray here are the fossil fuels. The shades of green represent the bioenergy, and here we've shown that a large part of that can be from residues and waste. Then you will need some some complementary fillings, so taking it from existing forests. Then you will need some bio crops, and after 2030 we think we can also introduce algae at a relatively attractive cost level. So that's the build-up of this bio band. And then below that you see the renewable sources of electricity, featuring hydropower, geothermal heat, geothermal electricity, solar thermal, concentrated solar for heat and for power, a large fraction of photovoltaic solar, wave and tidal energy, wind offshore, the dark blue band, and wind onshore in the light blue band. So this is actually the main concluding picture of the report. Some words about cost then, because of course this is a huge operation. It will require major investments in the grid, in all these renewable sources of energy, and last but not least in all these energy efficiency measures. What we've done here is to take a cash flow approach. So we've taken the capital expenditures, the so-called CapEx, the dashed line, as a percentage of global GDP. And we've shown that this should start at the level of like 1.5% of GDP diverted to these kind of investments, grow towards 3% of GDP in 2030, and then can diminish because many of the infrastructural investments have already been done and have a longer lifetime. So it can go down after that again. At the same time, we've taken the operational savings, so the savings in energy costs, compared to a fairly modest business as usual scenario. I mean fairly modest in terms of assumed energy price increases. We've taken those in the years that they are actually realized. So we've not put the assets on the balance sheet and then depreciated them. Then you can make it all look very pretty. But we've taken the investments in the year that you do them, and the operational savings in the year that you actually realize them. And of course this is an ever-growing fraction of GDP. And when you sum up these two, then the net costs, the net cash expenditure, the net amount of cash that the world has to divert to this, to building this sustainable energy system, is between 1.5 and 2% until 2030, and then the benefits start to outweigh the continuing investments, even turning into a cash positive picture after 2035. So of course this also brings some barriers with it. If you work with short-term planning, then it will be a problem to do this kind of effort. And of course, the initial investments are very large. 2% of GDP is comparable to what the world spends on cars, for example. But it's manageable. If you take the problems that I started the presentation with seriously, then you will appreciate that not taking action will incur very major costs as well. That's my concluding remarks. Of course, that this energy scenario, we've shown that it's possible. We've put the option on the table, so to speak, but it will require very strong action from all stakeholders to be realized. If you realize where we come from and where we should be heading for, you see that a very major transformation is required in only 30 to 40 years. And this requires action from the whole world. For example, if you look at the governments setting frameworks in demand for achieving performance standards on energy efficiency, if you investment into retrofits, investments into R&D and into infrastructure, and on the supply side, of course, providing the necessary enablers and incentives for a shift to a 100% renewable power system, which involves heavy investments in R&D into grids. Then, to conclude, these are the main takeaways from our main findings when working in this 2-year project. When one wants to achieve 100% sustainable energy supply, first of all, it's a prerequisite to maximize energy efficiency. That's always the best. There are so many options which have a very attractive return. It's so necessary to do this to avoid that you need even more bioenergy, etc. That is always part of such a scenario. Then we found that it's important to electrify as much as possible the demand, to shift it towards the most abundant renewable energy sources. Of course, on this electricity side, then we need to prepare our electricity grids for being able to accept a high share of supply-driven renewable sources, and we need to scale up these renewable power options themselves. Then for the residual fuel and heat demand, we need to make sure that this can be covered by sustainable bioenergy. And as I said, we spent a full chapter of like 30 pages on how this can be done without running into competition with food production and without causing additional water problems, etc. So I invite you to look at that. And of course, on the financial side, it's necessary to drum up the amount of cash that the world needs to make these initial investments. What's also a very important finding when one works on a project like this is that 39 years seems like a long time when you start a project, but actually when you want to do such a major renovation of the world energy system in this period, it's rather short. And action by all stakeholders is required now to change the direction and to start diminishing this energy consumption and its resulting global greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 or so. That's only 9 years from now. That's my story about the energy report. I would want to point out that it can be freely downloaded from our website. So if you go to www.ecofys.com, you will find on the homepage a link where you can download the report. I think it's quite a volume. It's like 15 or 20 megabytes, but it is available to anyone for further study. Thank you very much. This is what I had to tell you, and I look forward to the question and answer session.
Okay. Great. So thank you very much, Chris, for this very interesting presentation. We have now a good vision on what renewables can cope with. Excellent. So let's maybe go for some questions. So let's proceed one by one. So let's go for this first one. So could you please clarify your comments on developing countries on slide 15-16? So let's go back to slide 15. One moment, please. Okay. So this is 15, I suppose, stabilization in buildings. I don't know whether it's this slide or this one. Seems not very clear. Do you understand the question? Maybe, Chris.
Yes, well, I see a black screen now, but I can go back to my handout here. And slide 15 was on the stabilization of demand in buildings. And what I said about developing countries there is that, of course, in developing countries, we assume a lot more new construction going on than in the countries of the OECD, for example, like Europe and North America. Simply because the populations are growing faster and especially the economy is growing faster. So the share of buildings, when you look in 2050, the share of buildings that are new, that can still be designed now, is much higher than in Europe and North America. So the resulting energy demand is heavily influenced by what you do with new buildings and to a lesser extent by how you retrofit the existing buildings. Slide 16 is actually the one that disappeared in my oral presentation. It shows how those building heat needs can be provided by a little bit of bio, but a lot less than at present with the traditional biomass, with some geothermal, which is actually excluding the amount that can be provided by heat pumps, and with some solar thermal, especially where it concerns solar hot water.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So we have another question. So it's evident that almost all renewable energy sources are very intensive in land use. Is there any assessment on the amount of land which will be needed for producing such amount of energy?
In this study, we have looked deeply into the amount of land needed for bioenergy to make sure that it's compatible with food production, etc. But there are other studies that show you the amount that you would need for the other sources. And that is not, in general, a major bottleneck. Of course, it has to be taken into account. But for example, solar in heavily populated areas can be done on rooftops. And in deserts, there is ample space. Even a small percentage of the Sahara Desert would satisfy all the demands of Africa. With wind turbines, it's a different story. If they're offshore, of course, they compete with other uses of the sea, but there's a lot of space out there. If they're onshore, they can be combined with other functions. For example, the agricultural function of a piece of land that's used for a wind farm is not lost. It can be combined.
Okay, very well. So next question, what modeling you have done regarding real-time power system operation with all the various new generation inputs and customer-side interconnection storage systems that are needed to ensure secure operation? This seems a recurrent question, as I can read as well in the chat. High penetration of solar winds, which are intermittent sources, can be difficult to manage in terms of voltage regulation and frequency of electricity grid. So what can you tell us on this? Thank you.
Well, for this study we have drawn on modeling done in other studies. We have not tried to model the whole worldwide grid, but we have abstracted the discussion to finding out what percentage of supply-driven electricity a grid can take, and that's my slide 24, I believe. Yes, 24. So we've derived from all kinds of other studies, and we've done some ourselves. For example, for this Irish grid study, we've derived the percentage of supply-driven sources that are not able to be controlled by the level of demand at the very moment. That percentage that a grid can take without having to make storage facilities or greatly expand the interconnection with other regions. So we've taken from the body of knowledge for various regions a percentage of 25% as a conservative estimate of the present fraction that the grid can take, and we have derived that it will be necessary to increase this fraction of acceptable supply-driven renewables to 60%. We know that it's possible, but we've not gone into, and we know that the mix of technologies that you need is in grid improvements, demand-side management, and storage, but we've not endeavored to find an optimal mix in this study.
Okay, thank you. There is another question or comment. How will these macro policy goals will be translated into specific projects? Then this person comments on red screen software as a tool to help for project development. So can you comment anything on that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. That's of course a very interesting one, because we would love to see this being applied in practice. It's much in line with our own mission statement. And there's a variety of ways that we are working on that, and that actually any one of you is invited to work in. That can be studies at a regional scale to bring it closer to regional policy setting. We're preparing a number of those. It can be working with corporations, where we are discussing the energy report with boards of large companies who want to see what role their company could play in it. Of course, WWF uses it a lot to influence policy making. So they use this vision and their resulting demand for a 100% renewable energy supply in 2050 in all kinds of international and national meetings. And that shows you that at all scales you can profit from the fact that there's this framework describing what it could look like on a global scale. And yes, I'm aware of Red Screen. It has been around for a long time. I think we use it in the company as well. I'm not a daily user myself. It's not so close to my daily tasks, but I think it's a very helpful tool in which a lot of experience has been gathered over the years.
Okay, thank you. So indeed, for Red Screen, you can as well check the Leonardo Energy website, where we have run several webinars on the use of this software, and we are currently planning to go forward with this, with the especially e-learning of these modules. So you're all invited to go deeper in this topic as well, together with our Leonardo Energy webpage. Okay, so next question, was the use of hydrogen or hydrogen economy considered in this report? For example, the use of hydrogen for electricity storage as being able to increase renewable penetration in the grid. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It was not explicitly considered, but of course the example you give is one way of increasing the acceptability of supply-driven sources. So we've identified the need. We've concluded that increasing storage capacity can be part of the solution for ultra-high renewable electricity shares. And if hydrogen is a cost-effective option in that respect, it could become part of the solution at the storage site. Of course, it's also very interesting to see whether hydrogen can play a role to replace more of the high-temperature heat and fuels by electricity. Because if you can use hydrogen as an energy carrier, you can produce hydrogen with electricity. That would make it possible to have 100% scenarios with even less bioenergy, and it would give you some additional flexibility as well. For this study, we have not assumed that a large hydrogen infrastructure 39 years from now would be available. So we've not taken it explicitly into account. We've looked for one solution to a 100% sustainable energy supply. We are not telling that this is the solution. We're saying that this is a solution based on presently available technologies that at least shows you that it's possible and that it's feasible. And we would very much welcome a further optimization by hydrogen or other energy carriers becoming available on a large scale over this period.
Okay. Thank you. So let's go for other questions. One moment, please. Yes, so we have another question on solutions for islands. So the question is whether you considered solutions for islands where electrical grids are a limiting factor for electrification with renewable energy and biomass can be not abundant. Thank you.
Again, we've not studied that question in detail for this study, but we have done work ourselves, for example, for the Caribbean island of Bonaire, which has a very small electrical grid. And we have actually shown that 100% renewable electricity supply is possible there by a combination of wind energy, which actually represents the supply-driven component, and diesel generators run on biodiesel. And ideally for that island, the biodiesel should come from algae, which can be grown locally in old salt ponds. So you will have to look into the specific geography, the specific characteristics of the islands, but it's certainly possible for islands as well. And actually, the example that I mentioned of Ireland is a big island itself. It has the same challenges, but on a different scale.
Very well. There is another question or comment. Then, if I understood correctly, you invited us to join in projects with Ecofys. What kind of project participation do you think about? Thank you.
Well, it was actually even more general. I invite you to work with this material in your daily jobs and see how you can make use of it, how you can work on realizing parts of it in the projects that you do. But of course, cooperation with Ecofys is also very much welcomed. And that can be anything where we can be of added value to each other. So if you run a company that wants to go green, if you have a technology that would be very helpful, if you are in touch with the government for whom we could together do a country study, then that would all be very interesting. And you can either use my email address that is provided here in the speaker's contact box at the right side, but you can also use info@ecofys.com to get in touch.
Good.
Of course, Ecofys is a company, so in general we need some principle for a project. We need somebody who pays the bill. That's clear. We are very happy to put in all our time and energy, but we also have to run a company.
Okay, very well. Thank you. Thank you, Gus. We have another question oriented to the African countries. So, how do you see for African countries to be out from the traditional biomass supply and to have a sustainable energy supply by 2050, since the forest biomass coverage is very low? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. That's a very important matter. And we indeed agree that the traditional biomass as it is now, and especially with the doubling or tripling population, is not sustainable. I think there are many options to move away from that. For example, there are now low-cost biogas systems, of which we have developed one ourselves here at Ecofys, which can produce energy from manure. There's of course by now a big body of experience with all kinds of solar cooking devices, and of course if you talk about heating and cooling, new buildings of whatever size in all continents, including Africa, should be built to low energy standards, and this is possible in all climates and in even in various budget categories. So generically speaking, it's the same type of measures as in other continents, but of course there's a lot to specifically address for the African situation.
Okay. Going further in this topic, what's your assessment or your opinion about the willingness and the capacity of governments to commit and deliver the challenges that you have identified? Capacity is particularly important vis-à-vis developing countries. So thanks for your comments.
Thank you for the question. That of course greatly varies by country and over time. So you always see countries, regions that are front runners. It's not only governments, it's also companies that take the lead here. So it's not only countries but also companies. For example, the EU does have a stated policy of reducing its emissions by 80 to 95% in 2050, which basically means that the long-term policy is in place to do something like this for Europe. But of course, that has to be translated in so-called directives, European laws that govern the shorter term. And it is being done, and there's a lot of debate on the emission side whether it can be more ambitious for 2020. And then the directives have to be translated into national regulations by the various member states. And there, for example, we see that the UK has a climate law that by law also attacks it from the emissions side. It states that these kind of emissions reductions should be achieved by 2050. Also states all intermediary goals. In general, I see energy policies strongly developing in the right direction, in direction of more energy efficiency, more renewables, but we will need a lot more ambition even than at present to get anywhere near 100% in 2050. On the developing countries, of course, capacity is important, but you also see a huge increase in capacity. If we take China and India, for example, they have a huge development going on renewables and also on energy efficiency, but also smaller countries. For example, the world's most efficient solar cells are produced in Manila, I believe. So there's strong developments going on, and there's a huge, I fully agree with you, Roy Joseph, there's a huge demand for capacity building in developing countries still.
Okay, excellent. So we have some other questions. We will, do you have still more, 5 more minutes, I guess, for questions?
Yes, I've reserved until 5:15 our time, so that's another 5 minutes, yes.
Okay, excellent. So let's go for a few more questions, as the topic seems to be extremely interesting for the audience. So next question, what were the biggest differences between Ecofys' optimistic outlook for energy demand and the less optimistic outlooks from other organizations?
Well, first of all, about the word outlook, it's not like a forecast. It's what we say is possible if you apply all available technologies in the right way. And I think a difference with many other studies is that we've really started from the demand side. In some other studies, you will find maybe 3 or 4 pages on the demand side, which are quite generic. But we've actually dived into the composition of the demand. First of all, looking at the economic growth, then at the physical demand, how you can reduce that, and then per technology, per material, per mode of transport, how you can do it in the most energy efficient way. And only in that way can you get to these kind of percentages. But in a way, it's not surprising that there's a huge potential out there, because if you look at the global energy efficiency, so you look at the efficiency from, for example, a quantity of fossil fuel that's being taken out of the ground, right until the delivery of a useful quantity of light in a building, then the efficiency is often only a few percent. Some steps like the conversion from fuel to electricity may have an efficiency of 40 to 50%, but the last steps all often have the lowest efficiency. For example, an incandescent light bulb has an efficiency itself of converting electricity into light of 2%. So that basically takes down the efficiency of the whole chain. And if this lamp, be it a LED lamp or a CFL or an incandescent, burns in a room where nobody notices, where nobody is present, the efficiency is actually 0%. So there are various estimates, but we think that the overall energy efficiency of the global energy system is only a few percent, so that more than 90% is wasted. And that explains why there are such huge potentials. And we've tried to go really far into this because we think it's necessary. And then you can show that you can achieve an improvement of like 4 to 5% per year over a sustained period. And actually this is the percentage that has been achieved by China in the way of decoupling energy consumption from economic growth over the past 5 years, and is also prescribed in the next 5-year plan for the country.
Okay, good. So thank you very much. I think that we have made the round now. So very good topic, very good analysis. So thank you very much to provide to us, to our audience, and to the rest of the world this this good analysis with a lot of hope about green future. So thank you very much. Thank you very much as well to our audience. And well, I let you, Keith, to close the webinar for today. So
well, thank you for Fernando for the excellent organization and for the excellent moderation. For me, it was a great pleasure. It was good to see that so many of you are there and are still there. I enjoyed the questions and answers a lot. Also, your feedback has been very encouraging. And I look forward to working with many of you on these topics in the coming decades.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, see you soon, everybody. Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.
Okay. So, okay, are you there still?
Yep.
Okay. So we stopped the broadcasting. So